What would you do if your own grandchild whispered that your daughter was plotting against you? I thought I was in for a quiet day, until one sentence turned my whole world upside down. Trust me, you won't believe what we discovered in the end. I was just finishing my second cup of coffee because, let's be honest, one is never enough when my daughter. Lisa came barreling down the hallway, heels clicking like a metronome set to panic. She was juggling her laptop bag, a half-eaten granola bar, and her phone, which was wedged between her shoulder and her ear. I could hear her boss's voice squawking through the speaker, something about a last-minute meeting. Lisa's hair was still damp from her shower, and she had that look in her eyes, the one that said, "I'm running late, but I'm pretending I'm not." She paused just long enough to kiss me on the cheek. Tasse, don't let Tommy eat too many cookies. Over her shoulder, and then she was out the door in a flurry of car keys and perfume. The front door slammed, and just like that, the house was quiet again. I let out a sigh, the kind that only comes after a morning of organized chaos, and glanced at the clock. Bad 11 a.m., not bad. I had the whole day ahead of me, and I was already planning a little me time. You know, the kind where you put on your comfiest robe, slap on a face mask, and settle in for a marathon of those old reruns you've seen 100 times but still love. Maybe I'd even sneak a cookie or two myself. After all, what Lisa didn't know wouldn't hurt her, right? Just as I was about to head to the living room, I felt a gentle tug on my sleeve. I looked down to see Tommy, my sweet, freckle-faced grandson, staring up at me with those big brown eyes that always reminded me of his mother when she was his age. He was clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur, the one he'd named Mr. Chompers, and his lower lip was trembling ever so slightly. "Grandma?" he whispered, glancing nervously over his shoulder as if he expected Lisa to pop back in at any moment. "Don't go home. I heard Mom planning something against us this morning. Believe me. Now I've always loved a good mystery. Give me a cozy whodunit and a cup of tea. And I'm a happy woman, but this was a little too Agatha Christie for my taste, especially before breakfast had even settled. My mind started racing. Was Lisa plotting to swap my decaf for regular again? She knew how jumpy I got when I had too much caffeine. Or heaven forbid, was she planning to sign me up for another Zumba class? The last time she did that, I pulled a muscle I didn't even know I had and spent a week walking like a penguin. But Tommy's eyes were wide, and his little hand was shaking. This wasn't one of his usual games or a ploy to get out of chores. I could feel the fear in him, and it sent a chill down my spine. I knelt down so we were eye to eye, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. "What did you hear, sweetheart?" I asked, keeping my voice as calm as I could manage. He looked around again, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Mom was on the phone. She said, 'Tonight's the night. I'm finally going to do it. They won't know what hit them.'" He swallowed hard, his grip on Mr. Chompers tightening. "She was talking about us, Grandma. I just know it." I tried to keep my face neutral, but inside, my heart was doing somersaults. Lisa was always full of surprises, but this sounded different. I thought about all the times she'd pulled pranks on me, like the time she replaced my shampoo with mayonnaise, or the April Fools when she convinced me she'd adopted a pet snake. But this felt more serious, and Tommy's fear was real. I could see it in the way he kept glancing at the door, as if expecting his mother to burst back in and catch us, plotting our escape. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Okay, Tommy," I said, squeezing his hand. "If you're worried, then I'm worried. We else stick together, all right?" He nodded, relief washing over his face. I tried to inject a little humor into the situation, hoping to lighten the mood. "Besides, if your mom's planning to make us eat her famous kale casserole again, we'll need to be ready to run for it." He managed a small giggle, and I felt a bit of the tension ease. But the worry lingered, like a storm cloud on the horizon. I glanced around the house, suddenly seeing it in a new light. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the hallway felt ominous. Was I being ridiculous? Maybe, but when your grandson looks at you with that much trust and fear, you don't ignore it. So what did we do? We ran, Well, I ran. Tommy skipped. Kids have way too much energy, don't they? We grabbed our jackets, a couple of granola bars, and Mr. Chompers, and slipped out the back door as quietly as we could. I felt a little silly, like we were starring in our own spy movie, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe Lisa was just planning a surprise party or a silly prank. But maybe, just maybe, there was more to it as we hurried down the street. Tommy's hand in mine, I couldn't help but wonder what exactly had Lisa meant, and what were we running from? All I knew was that, for the first time in a long time, I was both scared and excited. And as we ducked behind the neighbor's hydrangea bush, I realized that sometimes the biggest adventures start with the smallest whispers. Asterisk. We ducked behind the neighbor's big hydrangea bush, the kind that blooms in wild, unruly clusters of blue and purple every summer. And I found myself praying that Mrs. Jenkins wouldn't spot us crouched in her yard and come over to regale us with yet another story about her cats. Latest escapades last week. It was how Mr. Whiskers had learned to open the fridge, and frankly, I wasn't sure I could handle another feline adventure right now. I tried to steady my breathing, feeling the cool morning dew soak through the knees of my jeans, and glanced at Tommy, who was peeking through the leaves like a pine-sized detective. "Tommy, what exactly did you hear?" I whispered, my voice barely more than a breath, trying to keep the tremor out of it. He looked around, all dramatic, his eyes darting back and forth as if he expected his mother to materialize out of thin air. And then he leaned in close, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial hush. "Mom was on the phone," he said, his words tumbling out in a rush. "She said tonight's the night. I'm finally going to do it. They won't know what hit them." I blinked, my mind racing. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounded less like a PTA meeting and more like a Dateline episode. And suddenly I was picturing all sorts of wild scenarios. Was Lisa planning a surprise? A prank? Or was this about that time I accidentally shrunk her favorite sweater in the wash and tried to pass it off as fashionably fitted? I could feel my heart thumping in my chest, and for a split second, I wondered if I was being ridiculous. Crouching in a bush with my grandson, hiding from my own daughter. But then I looked at Tommy, his little face so earnest and worried, and I knew I couldn't just brush it off. I tried to lighten the mood, hoping to chase away some of the fear that was starting to settle in my bones. "Well, Tommy," I said, nudging him gently, "if we're going down, at least we'll go down together, like Thelma and Louise, but with more arthritis." He giggled, the sound bubbling up and breaking the tension, and for a moment the fear melted away, replaced by the simple joy of sharing a secret with someone you trust. But only for a moment. Because as we crouched there, the world seemed to slow down. Every sound amplified, the distant bark of a dog, the hum of a lawnmower starting up, the faint clink of Mrs. Jenkins' wind chimes. I found myself thinking back over the past few weeks, searching for clues I might have missed. Lisa had been acting a little odd lately, more distracted than usual. And there had been that mysterious Amazon package she'd hidden in her closet. Was it all connected? Or was I letting my imagination run wild, fueled by too many late-night crime shows and not enough sleep? I glanced at Tommy, who was now busy drawing patterns in the dirt with a stick. His earlier anxiety momentarily forgotten, and I felt a surge of protectiveness. Whatever was going on, I was determined to keep him safe, even if it meant spending the rest of the day hiding in a bush, dodging Mrs. Jenkins and her army of cats. I shifted my weight, wincing as my knee popped honestly. "Why don't they warn you about all the snap, crackle, and pop that comes with getting older?" And tried to come up with a plan. Should we stay put and wait for Lisa to come looking for us? Or should we make a break for it? Maybe head to the park or the library, somewhere public and safe. I weighed the options, my mind spinning with possibilities, and realized that, for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sort of excitement, like I was part of an adventure, not just a bystander in someone else's story. I glanced at my watch, noting that it was still early, and decided that, for now, the best thing to do was to stay hidden and keep an eye on the house. If Lisa really was planning something, maybe we'd catch her in the act. I nudged Tommy, who looked up at me with wide, trusting eyes and whispered, "All right, partner, here's the plan. We stay low, keep quiet, and watch for any suspicious activity. If you see anything weird, like your mom sneaking around with a cake or a bucket of water balloons, you'll let me know, okay?" He nodded solemnly, his earlier fear replaced by a sense of purpose, and I couldn't help but smile. We were in this together, come what may. As the minutes ticked by, I found myself relaxing, just a little, enjoying this simple pleasure of being outside with Tommy, sharing a secret, even if it was a slightly ridiculous one. I thought about all the times I'd played hide and seek as a child, the thrill of hiding, the rush of being found, and realized that maybe, just maybe, a little bit of fear and excitement was exactly what I needed to shake up my routine. Still, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was about to happen, something big. And as I watched the sunlight filter through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the grass, I promised myself that, whatever came next, I'd face it head on. After all, life's too short to spend it hiding in the bush unless, of course, you're doing it with your favorite grandson. Asterisk. We waited, crouched behind Mrs. Jenkins' hydrangea bush, the leaves tickling my face and the damp earth seeping into my knees, which by now were screaming louder than a toddler denied a cookie. I shifted my weight, trying to find a comfortable spot. But let's be honest, there's no such thing as comfortable when you're a woman of a certain age hiding in a shrubbery. Tommy, on the other hand, seemed perfectly content, peeking through the branches with the kind of patience only a child on a secret mission can muster. I was starting to regret not grabbing a snack before our little adventure. My stomach was rumbling, and I was pretty sure even Mrs. Jenkins' cats could hear it. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling longer than the last, and I found myself wondering if maybe we'd overreacted. Maybe Lisa was just having a bad morning, or maybe Tommy had misheard her. But then, just as I was about to suggest we sneak back inside and pretend none of this ever happened, we heard the familiar sound of Lisa's car pulling into the driveway hours before she was supposed to be home. I tensed, grabbing Tommy's hand, and we both ducked a little lower, hearts pounding in unison. Through the gaps in the leaves, we watched as Lisa stepped out of the car, her arms full of, was that a bunch of balloons? And a giant cake box, balanced precariously on top of a stack of colorful gift bags. I blinked, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. This was not the behavior of a woman plotting against her mother and son unless, of course, she was planning to smother us with confetti and buttercream. Tommy and I exchanged glances, his eyes wide with confusion and a hint of relief. "Should we make a run for it?" I whispered, only half joking, because at this point my legs were so stiff I wasn't sure I could run if I tried. He shook his head, his curiosity getting the better of him. "Let's see what she does," he whispered back, his voice barely audible over the sound of my own heartbeat. So we stayed put, watching as Lisa bustled around the front porch, her face lit up with excitement. She hung up a big, glittery banner that read, "Happy birthday, Mom," and another one that said, "World's Best Grandma." I felt a wave of emotion wash over Marie's, embarrassment, and, if I'm being honest, a little bit of pride. All that fear, all that drama, and it turns out my daughter was planning a surprise party for me. I nearly burst out laughing right there in the bushes. But I managed to stifle it, not wanting to give away our hiding spot just yet. Tommy looked up at me, his face breaking into a sheepish grin. "Guess we're safe, Grandma," he said. And I couldn't help but pull him into a tight hug, my heart swelling with love for this sweet, imaginative boy. "Next time, let's just ask, okay?" I whispered, and he nodded, though I could see the mischief still dancing in his eyes. I had a feeling this wouldn't be our last adventure together. As we watched Lisa finish decorating, I thought about all the times I'd worried about the future, about growing older, about losing touch with the people I love. But in that moment, crouched in a bush with my grandson, watching my daughter go out of her way to make me feel special, I realized that life is full of surprises, some scary, some silly, but all of them worth experiencing. Eventually, we crept out from our hiding spot, brushing leaves and twigs from our clothes, and made our way up the driveway. Lisa spotted us and burst out laughing, her eyes shining with joy. "Were you two hiding from me?" she asked, and I couldn't help but laugh along with her, the tension of the morning melting away. You have no idea, I said, giving her a hug and feeling grateful for every moment, good, bad, and ridiculous. The rest of the day was a blur of laughter, cake, and stories, surrounded by family and friends who had all come together to celebrate another year of life. Love, and, apparently, amateur sleuthing. As the sun set and the last guests trickled out, I sat on the porch swing with Tommy, the two of us wrapped in a cozy blanket, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. You know, Grandma, he said, his voice soft and thoughtful, I think we make a pretty good team. I smiled, ruffling his hair. The best team, I agreed, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. Maybe we'd overreacted. Maybe we'd let our imaginations run wild. But in the end, it didn't matter. What mattered was that we'd faced our fears together and come out the other side with a story to tell and a memory to cherish. And as I looked at Tommy, his eyes already drooping with sleep, I knew that whatever adventures lay ahead, we'd face them the same way, side by side, with a little bit of courage, a lot of love, and, hopefully, a few more snacks. Asterisk. We snuck back inside the house, trying our best to look casual, as if we hadn't just spent the better part of an hour crouched behind Mrs. Jenkins' hydrangea bush, dodging both her and her parade of cats and whispering like a pair of amateur detectives in a small-town mystery novel. I brushed a stray leaf from Tommy's hair and straightened my own shirt, hoping no one would notice the grass stains on my knees or the twigs tangled in my hair. The living room was suspiciously quiet, and for a split second, I wondered if maybe we'd imagined the whole thing, maybe the banners and balloons were just a mirage, brought on by low blood sugar and too much excitement. But then, as we tiptoed around the corner, Lisa leaped out from behind the couch, followed by a chorus of surprise. From a room full of smiling faces, family, friends, neighbors, and even Mrs. Jenkins herself, who, thankfully, seemed more interested in the cake than in asking why I'd been lurking in her bushes. I did my best Oscar-worthy, shocked face, clutching my chest and gasping dramatically. And everyone burst out laughing, the tension of the day melting away in a wave of joy and relief. Lisa hugged me tight, whispering, "You had no idea, did you?" And I had to admit she'd pulled off the perfect surprise. The decorations were beautiful streamers in my favorite colors, photos from years gone by, and a big glittery sign that read, "Happy Birthday, Mom. World's Best Grandma." The cake was a masterpiece, 3 layers of chocolate and cream, topped with fresh strawberries and enough candles to make the fire department nervous. As I blew them out, surrounded by the people I loved most, I couldn't help but laugh at how the day had turned out, how a simple whisper from Tommy had sent us on a wild adventure, only to bring us right back home to a room full of love and laughter. The company was even better than the cake, and that's saying something because Lisa had gone all out with the dessert. We shared stories, played silly party games. I may or may not have dominated the trivia round. Age has its perks, after all, and even Mrs. Jenkins got in on the fun, regaling everyone with tales of her cat's latest antics. Tommy stuck close by my side, his earlier fear forgotten, his eyes shining with excitement as he helped me open presents and sneak extra slices of cake when he thought no one was looking. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the last guests trickled out, leaving behind a trail of wrapping paper and laughter, I found myself on the porch swing with Tommy, the two of us wrapped in a cozy blanket, watching the fireflies flicker in the warm evening air. The world felt quiet and peaceful, the kind of quiet that only comes after a day filled with joy and just a hint of chaos. Tommy leaned his head on my shoulder, his voice soft and thoughtful as he said, "You know, Grandma, life's never boring with you." I smiled, ruffling his hair, my heart full to bursting. "And I wouldn't have it any other way," I replied, thinking of all the adventures we'd shared and all the ones still to come. We sat there for a while, just the two of us, listening to the crickets and the distant sound of laughter drifting from the kitchen. And I realized that these were the moments I'd remember, the quiet ones. The silly ones, the ones that made all the worries and fears seem small by comparison. I promised myself right then and there to never take them for granted, to always say yes to a little adventure, even if it meant hiding in a bush or risking a grass stain or two. As Tommy's eyelids grew heavy and he snuggled closer, I thought about how quickly time passes, how children grow up and life changes, but how love-real, messy, everyday love stays the same. So, ladies, if you ever find yourself on the receiving end of a whispered warning from your grandchild, maybe listen, but also maybe check for cake first. Because sometimes the things we fear turn out to be the sweetest surprises. And the best stories are the ones we never saw coming. And if you enjoyed this little adventure, don't forget to subscribe for more stories, because with family like mine, you never know what's waiting around the corner except, hopefully, another slice of cake. Asterisk.